All right. Okay, cool. So I think you know the format, like 30 minutes informal conversation. And I got a bunch of questions on my screen. And then at the end, you got questions. Today's questions are about British Prime Ministers.
Oh, good God, which one? I can't keep up.
We'll get there at the end. We had the Queen because we recorded before the Queen. Everyone failed miserably. They were Americans answering the questions, but they failed totally miserably. Another American, we did European geography. He didn't get a single question correct, which interesting. But anyway, okay. So I first knew of you from Molpedo, which was years and years ago. Was that the first kind of big thing you did in security, or had you done other stuff before then?
Wow, that's a good question. I'd say for me the first big thing was the testing guide. Like that came about. I was working at Financial Times. I then moved on to help do Vodafone's original Vodafone Live rollout, so the security testing when they moved over to 3G, and there was all these newfangled web apps. And yeah, you did the announcement 2001. We started work on testing guide 2002, something like that. So yeah, I'd say that was like for me the first big thing. It was
first big thing. Okay, so let's talk about that. So it's still going strong 20 years afterwards, right? So what was the what's the sort of history of that and the goals and all of that sort of stuff?
The testing guide?
Yeah.
It's funny when you did the initial 21st birthday of OWASP, I started to think back to like the chats that we were having at the time. You know, these web apps were coming out. All of us who were involved in network level exploitation were seeing the web apps, and nobody really knew what to do. We were all like young lovers fumbling in the dark. It's like
go ahead.
Just put your finger in somewhere, hope something, and that was it. It was like if you looked at all the tools, like the really early, you had Paris Proxy, you had Rogan's one, crap.
Yeah,
it was like
Whisker.
Yeah, it was really, right? It was raw. It was like really raw, and I think the idea was, well, we kind of knew what to do in the network stack. Because, you know, at the time, I was helping host hack.coza, which was an exploit archive. So like we knew the network stack, right? But the application stack, like that was a whole new world. And I think that's where the testing guide was quite cool. It was like, all right, so if you find this thing called Apache, it's a web server, this is what you can do to it. You know, you can use a Perl script to get this from it. And I think that was quite cool because it was a nice exploratory phase of my life where you saw the benefit of a standard testing guide, like a cheat sheet, but also the community that was forming. Because at the time, like I was heavily involved in the Linux community, and that was the desktop stuff. So it was Enlightenment with Rasterman and, you know, Linux on the desktop. That was a funny dream. Trying to get sound working and these newfangled wireless devices that came out. And like, it was a really cool introduction to the open source community and giving back.
So, okay, hack.coza, you smiled. What's the story there then?
GovBoy created the site to share exploit code once everybody had kind of got bored with it, owning the shit out of everything on the internet. And yeah, it was very early internet days. It was heavily attacked, like literally, because everybody wanted to own the crap out of hack.coza and get all the O-days that were coming through, because naturally there was a pipeline. Hosting was super expensive, as you remember, like really, and hack.coza had a fair amount of traffic. Like the content wasn't huge, you know, it was exploit code. So 10 kilobytes, maybe like something, it was a scanner, a meg type thing, but it was expensive. So one of the things I offered when I was at PSINet was to host it somewhere hidden in the data centers. And if you actually go through historic DNS records, you will see that a very large hosting provider was hosting a fully shared exploit site. And funny story, like it was being attacked all the time. So I had at my disposal a shitload of equipment. They were a heavy Spark user. There were Windows servers, and the Spark stuff was getting owned, and the Windows was getting owned, and then Cobalt came out with this thing called a rack, and it was a Motorola chip. And I was like, holy crap, this is amazing, the shellcode won't work. Let's do it on that. So I borrowed one and racked it and gave it an IP address. And yeah, within 4 weeks that was owned as well, because somebody managed to figure out they could do the architecture. But it was a good early day of the stuff that we gave away for free at an export level that now you'd never do. Like, it was worth millions. Why would you do that? Right. NSO Group, whole business model now, right? Or whatever. Yeah. I mean, you know, Dino Dizovi came out with the infamous thing. God, I forgot when that was. I want to say 2005, 6, no more free bugs. We were giving away stuff for free that now it's life-changing, you know, 0-click remote access, iOS, you're looking at 1 million, 1.5 million. Network level stuff is 150, 200K. So we were a bit crazy then. All right, Maltego then. So Maltego is the next thing. Maltego came later with SensePost. 2011, Glenn and I had an idea for Wi-Fi. Maltego was already there. We were working together with Rulof. I think that's when I got my first bite of security has a data problem. We were generating a lot of data back then. Now, like it's obscene amounts. And the tools that everybody were using to work with that data were just crap. I remember on a red team in Bloomington, Illinois. I'm not going to say the company name, but it's not that hard. And like the network's vast, probably one of the biggest networks I've ever red teamed. And Maltego really helped me to understand lateral movement and better ways of exfiltrating data. Just because the fact you could use Maltego machines and Maltego teeth at the time, which was the offensive arm, to pull in vast amounts of data into a graph and say, right, there's the node I want, that's connected to that. And then we kind of, when Glenn and I were doing Snoopy, so Snoopy was our foray into wireless fiddling. We had an idea building upon what Dino did with Karma, where Glenn and I found that we could take vulnerabilities in the Wi-Fi stack that we'd messed with and use it for mass surveillance. So this was pre-Snowden. We built the Snoopy framework where we wanted to basically track people using Wi-Fi and beaconing and AP calls. And again, data problem. We did it at Black Hat because we wanted to prove that it can be done for a nefarious purpose. And where's the best place to do it? Well, you can't do it in public. I'd already been arrested for hacking. I'm not going to do that again. We went to Black Hat and I asked Ping, said, listen, we want to do these drones that we were calling them. She was like, yeah, go for it. And we did. We really proved that we could build malicious drones that intercepted traffic at scale pre what came out from Snowden. And that was a good journey, but Maltego helped there because did you get backlash for deploying that at Black Hat? Nobody knew. No one knew? Nobody knew. Well, they do now. Nobody knew back then. Really? I mean, how many people did it? Hey, sorry? How many people did you get? Oh, there was tens of thousands. Jeez. Like it was the early, you know, it's like if you go to the DEF CON network, you know, Grifter and Bart are going to hate me for this, but they are hostile networks. Yeah. You know, you should, to be fair, modern Black Hat DEF CON networks are phenomenal. Like they are what I inspire to be when you're building a network. You can't do anything on those networks anymore. Yeah. Like they will detect it, they will come in. Bots, there's man mountain. Like you don't want him to come into a room to say, what are you doing on my network? But yeah, it was a good proving ground. And Maltego was a massive, massive win there. And I still love the tech. I think Maltego and link analysis and everything that it was built around the fact that you could write your own transforms and it was relatively easy to do. And the stuff that Andrew McPherson, old pretty boy, was doing was really damn cool. It was advancing the fact that you had this small startup building tech that damn near everybody was using versus the big players like IBM with their analyst notebook, which cost a fortune, or Palantir, which is when we started seeing it about 2012. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so today you run security research for a bank, which we won't talk specifically about the bank, but I'm intrigued because I know you do a bunch of hardware stuff, like we've had conversations around hardware stuff you do. Like, what sort of stuff do the banks care about with hardware
And, you know, like what types of devices? Is it like network devices, ATM, generic chips, phone stuff? Like what does it look like?
I think we're in a phase at the moment. I've been using this phrase for a while. We're in the golden age of hardware hacking. Go back 10 years to get into hardware hacking. It cost money, and it cost an obscene amount of money. Like, it wasn't something a hobbyist could do. You know, an oscilloscope was an investment, right? So, you know, you didn't have the frameworks, you know, the tools. It was really expensive to set up a hardware lab. Fast forward to now, I can use a software logic analyzer from Salier, or I can get a Chinese knockoff for $100. You've got Flipper Zero, which is really bringing hardware security type stuff to the masses. You can design something using KiCad, get it shipped out to JLPCB, and get that board back to you within 7 days.
Wow.
Rapid prototyping is just, it's so low cost now. And like Joe Fitz, who's just a phenomenal hardware person, like genuinely, I look up to him a lot. He said to me on one of his training courses, like, what a lot of people are now doing is seeing how hardware enables you to get from hardware to software really quickly, whereas before it was always hard. And yes, you have the annoying grain of rice crap, but the implant stuff, that's still a threat. And I think across to anybody in enterprise, you know, putting a rogue device onto a network is a problem. The fact that we use these devices so much. So the secondhand market's big. How do you know that this has not been backdoored? You know, Bunny's precursor project, and one of my top projects that I've seen in a long time, goes about how do you verify the chain of trust? And I think that's where hardware is coming back in, where people are now going, it's not all about software. It's about a device that can go in, that can be plugged in to do something, exfiltrate something, subvert something, and it's low cost and it's easy to do.
Right. But you just said you're going to get Chinese knockoffs, cheap Chinese knockoffs of your hardware analysis tools. Isn't that a bit ironic?
It is. There is that risk. I mean, go into AliExpress and you'll see a wide range of security tools that have been copied. There is that risk. But like, it's no longer a, wow, I need to spend 1,000 quid on something. It could be, I'll spend 50 quid.
Yeah.
I think that's helped open up a hell of a lot of access to a market that was traditionally quite closed.
Yeah. So Jordan Robertson's Supermicro stuff, which was an accusation. It was more than an accusation, right? It was originally an accusation. The lawyers tried to shut it down. They went back and got proof. The second time that came back around, that kind of got ushered under the carpet, I think, right? Like, it wasn't. I mean, if like the proof was so empirical, and the fact and the impact of that backdoor chips, it kind of felt like it was like the internet melted down, but it wasn't the internet melted down. Like, what's your take on that?
The article was interesting. You know, if you look at what we learned from the NSA catalog, where, backdooring has happened. It's been happening for a long time. I mean, I worked at an ISP in the late 90s where every Friday stuff happened, right? That was a normal thing. I think as we get better at the software stuff, you know, we're just not sure what constitutes known good. And if you can subvert that, especially at scale, you know, yes, the grain of rice thing was horribly blown up. Like, it wouldn't happen. But there's nothing stopping you getting a server with a daughter board that does something that might call out, that might not get detected by modern security controls. Like, it's not totally impossible. It's an expensive attack. There are probably easier ways to do it. Like, you know, the main thing with hardware is going from hardware to software as quickly as possible. So, and that's where I think a lot of the implant stuff gets confused. It's like, you're not going to have the super secret box that just sits there all the time. It's going to be elevating them to do something else.
And I guess the network, I mean, if you look at the Huawei stuff, again, the impact though, and like, you know, the potential they could do is vast, right? Okay, so you've been involved in your car hacking as well, right? Like, you jack your car through a CAN bus, don't you?
Yeah, so I love my cars. I've got a large collection, mostly classics. I don't really have modern ones, but it kind of started. My brother does tuning, so all race tuning, and like you know, the worlds collided. Modern cars are just computers with wheels. Sorry. So I got playing with how do you do this? And we did a few assessments at SensePost where it was playing with cars. There was one, people searched the blog, where learning how to steal cars. That was quite cool.
Yep.
I did one screw up. The wife had a Mercedes SUV, and I decided to, you know, do what you do when you plug in and fuzz stuff. I bricked the car. Let me tell you the shit that came down on for me. I felt awful because she's now like, the car won't start. I need to go and take the kids somewhere. I'm like, okay, how long do I fix this?
How did you get around it? To a garage and get them to unbrick it?
There was a process to get the ECU unbricked, but yeah, let's just say that was a tense couple of hours because the car was dead. Like, it just wasn't moving because I'd busted. You know, I'd thrown everything at it, and that thing just like, nope, ain't starting.
There was as a guy, actually, I'll name him, Justin Simoni, he's the CISO of Unity. He used to work at Charles Schwab with me. And he ran a network scanner, and we had two mainframes at Schwab with a piece of dark fiber going between the thing at Phoenix, and he hit the time clock and he bricked the mainframe as well. It's like, it's pretty easy to do, I guess, right? And stuff like that.
Yeah, we've all done it. There's one young chap who I love, Ashcon. So he's computer engineer, got into car hacking. For me, the traditional sense of car hacking. He had an older Mercedes, he upgraded the head unit to an Android-based one. And then from there, just went on a tangent where he looked at the transmission control unit. The Mercedes ones, like, they're old now. They're 20 years old. They've got old tech. They're starting to deteriorate. And he, through the process of like a year during lockdown, he's built his own. He's built his own open source TCU. That is phenomenal. And I've been tweeting, and like, he's a good friend now. I'm like, this new generation are going to be okay because traditionally, like, I've got a 470s Mercs. I know how to fix them. But if you look at the late 90s, early 2000s hot hatches, that technology is starting to break because it's reached the end of the life of the components. Capacitors are just dying. Nobody knows how to fix that. So it's like you have all these cars that people still like, but it's this new generation like Ash who are going, you know what? I really don't want to throw the car away because it's an environmental mess. Here's an open source TCU that has all these cool new features, that has Wi-Fi, you can flash firmware in a secure way. And it's available for you. And I think that's phenomenal. For me, that's the original sense of hacking. It's like, I want to keep it going.
Yeah, make a generation, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Black Hat, you're on the review board. How did you get involved in the review board? It's the first kind of thing around Black Hat.
I've been doing Black Hat 2003. We were doing training with SensePost, talked to Black Hat. And then, yeah, they just asked me to join the review boards 2015. Yeah, 2015.
So you were tweeting about it the other day. So you were kind of tweeting about, like, if you want to submit, like, here's a bunch of tips to submit. So what's the advice and what's the bad stuff that gets submitted? Like, what's the terrible things to never do, and then what's the good things to do?
I think we see people rush. And for a while now, we've been offering advice to anybody, not just for Black Hat, people submit to Black Hats, any con. Like, you got to imagine lots of people submit to various cons. Your submission needs to articulate the problem that you're trying to solve or the subject you're trying to narrate on. A lot of the times that first sentence doesn't come close. So you're left wondering, like, well, hang on, what are they talking about? What do they want me to get excited about? And I am like a kid at Christmas. I want to learn about this stuff, so tell me. That's the first thing. The other thing is they don't elaborate. Like, you know, okay, I found this amazing bug in something. Accepted. How big is the problem, right? Are you building on past bugs? How widespread is this product? How easy? What's the vendor been like? Give us lots of details. And, you know, like, there's a big misconception about how the review process works. To give you an idea, for USA, I'm not going to say how many submissions there were, but there are lots. I traditionally spend 3-4 months doing reviews. We then do calls, so an hour and a half call often. So that was 29 hours worth of conference calls where we discuss and talk and do prior research checks. And we really go deep on the research because we want, one, people to talk about the cool stuff. Two, we want to be sure that you're not, you know, paying homage to people that just the shoulders of the giants you're standing upon, because that's really important. There is a lot of prior art out there. And then 3, we want it to be entertaining. And I think that's the key difference. What people get right is when I go and see a talk, I want to be entertained. It's a journey, right? If it's a deep technical thing, release that as a white paper. Don't sit there with 9 bullet points on a slide and say, just read it off. It's boring. It's really hard. Like, take people on a journey. And the one thing I love speakers to do now, talk to us about your failures, please, because nothing we do is without failure. And in fact, you speak to anybody, 90% of the stuff is the miserable failing. I was at BrewCon the other week, the Starlink talk, hacking the Starlink terminals, which for me is one of my top talks this year. Like, a big chunk of that was failure. Like, it was miserable failure of stuff that didn't work. And I was like, that's a really key part of the talk, because people look at it and go, oh, they own the Starlink terminal. Tesla's got an amazing team. SpaceX has too. It must have been easy. But actually, no, they hated themselves for a long time because stuff just wasn't working. And I think that's a really important part.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, I guess the biggest impact one that I can remember was Dan Kaminsky, that whole fiasco with Cisco. And then you have lots of novel things, right, which are like incredibly clever. How do you balance like impact, like, owning a Cisco router in the world versus something which is incredibly clever? Is it like, do you look for a particular either or is it just like?
No, we do. I categorize a lot of talks as ones that plant the seed for others to build upon. So those are your foundational talks that might not actually have a huge impact now, but they're introducing a way of working or a tool or a methodology or an idea that inspires others who in 2 years' time might have gone, yeah, I saw that talk and oh, wow, it opened up a floodgate for me. That's that kind of talk. You never have ones that genuinely shape the internet. And perfect example, Orange Sai. Orange Sai is a machine, a lethal goddamn machine when it comes to bug hunting. I love his talks. I love James Kettle's talks. James Kettle has done more for application security than anybody else, I think, in this industry. Because every time they come up with research, it's well presented, it's well researched, it's impactful. People learn from it, and you see the weird following ons of people who got inspired from James's stuff from 2 years ago. And then you have the other stuff, like the stunt hacking stuff is hard because you found a bug in a dildo. Cool. Like we've had that before. It doesn't advance upon it. Now it might be that somebody actually finds a flaw in BLE. Cool, we'll expand upon it. But generally speaking, the stunt hacking stuff doesn't grab us anymore. It's about, are you making the internet better or worse? Is this a bug that could be bad and people might expand upon it? Or is it something that people would sit in the conference and go, I never knew that, I'm going to go and use that tomorrow morning. Like, that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, new classes advanced, that type of stuff, right? Yeah. I was laughing actually because I was thinking Charlie Miller's doing the OWASP keynote in a couple of weeks, and I always remember that, like, USA Today news of like you can stop a Jeep and turn its brakes on, and it was like absolutely sensational. But like, that guy's off the charts intelligent, and I'm sure he was kind of like rolling his eyebrows at like, this is the one people are picking up, right?
Yeah. And that was good research. And also, there's the third member of that team, Joe Grand. Like, it was Joe's hardware research that helped that a lot. And Joe Grand is the nicest person in security. Like, generally, he is phenomenal, but a true unsung hero of the hardware hacking world. Well,
Chris Wysop was the other super nice guy, and they both worked together at the Loft, right? I think Chris is the nicest guy in security, but there you go.
They are close. They are very close.
It's always funny in life that the smartest and most successful people tend to be the most down to earth and the nicest people ever. I guess Elon Musk is probably the one
that's an anomaly.
Okay, now you do a bunch of other work. I don't know whether you're able to talk about it, but you and I were talking about it over lunch. Altruistic stuff. Are you comfortable talking about that or not?
Which part?
What it is, and and the general stuff you do.
I don't know if I should actually talk about that.
All right, we'll edit that tiny bit out.
Sorry.
But no, that's good. Right, we're at the end, but I should have sent this ahead of time, actually. In fact, I won't edit it because it's unedited. But
you know what I can maybe talk about? The child sexual abuse stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, all right, fine. No, okay, I thought it was okay. I will talk about that.
No.
All right, start again.
No, carry on. This is unedited, so you know.
All right. I think like what happened for me when we had kids was a switch inside my brain got flipped. I get that the internet's good and bad. People can use it for good or bad things. What made it worse for me with the child sexual abuse stuff was seeing how that emotionally impacted me, knowing I was now a father. I know it sounds cliched and corny, but genuinely something changed. And I thought, here are people using stuff that I've either been involved in or my friends have been involved in to mask what they're doing to hurt and abuse children. I do not give a shit what adults do to each other, consenting adults. But children don't have the ability to consent. And I think that's why it's like, you know, it just upset me a little bit. I thought, well, what can I do? And that's where I started to look at, oh, I know enough people in the industry. And I reached out to the Internet Watch Foundation, who do amazing things. And a lot of people don't know about the stuff that they do. And the stuff they do is just, we overuse the term, but it's heroic. They catalog sites. And I thought, I know they have technical challenges, so let's put together a hackathon. And I went a bit rogue and I said, hey, Santander is putting together this hackathon thing, and I'm going to bring in all the cool people. And I asked them beforehand, what are your challenges? And we'll try and fit people into that. And there were normal things, categorization of data, building scanners and scrapers, using machine learning. Could you use machine learning to detect CSAM images? Because one of the problems IWF faces is that when you have a site or content that has images of children being abused, that has to be manually cataloged. 9-year-old girl, X, 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 and X. That impacts a human being. Like you wouldn't believe. You have PTSD. And I thought, okay, maybe we could use text to alleviate the problem. At the time, it was pretty damn hard. We spent a good couple of days trying to build a model to train it on data. It didn't work. It was hard. But then we also built tools that are still currently used. And I think that gave me a great sense because, like, I don't want pedophiles to think that they can use technology to hide what they're doing. No. Like, if you are trying to do that, there will be people out there that find you and hurt you because you've crossed the line. And it's just consenting adults, do what you need to do to each other. Hurt a child, not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been amazed by, talk about quickly OWASP before we move on to the questions. Like, you would think that you could mobilize a lot of people to do a lot of good, right? There's huge amounts of charities that surely need, you know, are struggling with funding, like famine crises and, you know, all sorts of stuff. Maybe that's a good idea. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple of minutes left. So I'm just dragging over the questions. I was going to choose PMs anyway, because you used to live, you were telling me over lunch the other day where Winston Churchill redefined the boundaries, right? So we were going to go for questions anyway. Okay. So Rishi Sunak is the second youngest PM. Who was the youngest?
David Cameron.
He wasn't. William Pitt the younger, who was 24.
Oh, okay. Wow, that was
years younger than Rishi. Who was the oldest?
Sorry, say who?
Who was the oldest?
I want to say Wilson.
Gladstone was 82.
Okay.
Second term. You're not doing very well. You're representing England here, and you're not doing
I'm failing at the last 100 years. Sorry.
These are quite hard questions, I've got to be honest. How many PMs have there been?
Oh, in the last month, or
no. In the last month, it's in the last 7 weeks, it's been 3. But no. In the entire history.
I have no idea. I mean,
I'll let you get within 10. Like, you can choose a range between 10.
If we go from Churchill, there's got to be 12 or 13.
It's 57.
Wow. Okay.
57 PM. So the next question, then, you're going to get completely wrong if you started with Churchill. What year was the first PM? When was our first ever Prime Minister?
I wouldn't even know. I would say 1800s, around 1850 plus.
1721, Robert Walpole. Unbelievable, isn't it? I know. Mind you, Churchill in the war, you must have assumed there was someone before them. That's a pretty poor answer.
I'm terrible.
Okay, so Truss was the shortest, shorter than a lettuce, the infamous That's correct. Who was the longest? And how long did the longest serve? And I'll let you get within 2 or 3 years.
So I thought they could only do, we don't have rules on how long, but normally it's what, 5-6 years before a general election is called, unless the party's re-voted in. I want to say max 8 years.
20 years. 20 years, 315 days. Robert Walpole, who was the first ever prime minister, served for almost 21 years.
Okay, wow, that's a long time. Okay, that
Unbelievable, isn't it? All right. Well, you did as bad as. In fact,
that's fine.
I think you got 0. Actually,
That's good.
Which is.
And politics.
All right, Dan. Awesome.
Thanks, sir. Have a good one.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.